And I'd just like to give an extra special thank you to my Asbantium level patrons, Chris Douglas, Fallon Cortez, and Jamie Ashton. Thank you so much for your support.
Sack Russell T. Davis, sack Jane Tranter, sack Phil Collinson, sack Julie Gardner, and I'll come back.
Oh God, where do I begin? Doctor Who has jumped the shark. It's all burning down now. I swear to God, Russell T Davis has a personal grudge against me. Why must you put me through this torture after I was so loyal to you for so long? You were meant to bring balance to Doctor Who, not leave it in darkness. Doctor Who Season 2's finale, The Reality War, is the most disappointing thing since Yuki Tsunoda's Barcelona qualifying run. After a really solid season that really seemed to redeem the current era of the show, the wheels all fell off on the last stretch of episodes. Wishworld was a decent premise that devolved into unnecessary setup, and well, the reality war was just a complete nosedive rather than a fitting payoff. It's almost like it's a bad idea to write your whole first part as purely setup for an episode that can't stick the landing by itself and has no actual plot. After spending the entirety of Wishworld in a dystopian alternate universe, the reality war crashes back down to Earth for an overblown, redundant and fan-servicey climax. And it's really not good. Really not good. And of course I subjected myself to it in the cinema, no less. You think I would have learned after last year. So, as we face a very uncertain future, what exactly went wrong with the reality war? Well, as always, that's what I'm here to find out, even if it causes me great suffering along the way. So, without any further ado, let's crash out together. So, of course, Wishworld was a very setup heavy episode, plunging us into this alternate universe and paying off the season arc by having the villainous Conrad Clark team up with the newly revealed Rani and her predecessor Mrs. Flood. After lots of alternate universe shenanigans, the episode ended in a very eye-rolling cliffhanger that mirrored that of The Legend of Ruby Sunday, seeing the reveal of the finale's actual villain, Omega. More on him later, and yes, that's actually how you pronounce his name, based on how it's said in his very first story, all the way back in 1973. I don't make the rules, so please don't judge me for it. Anyway, in the midst of all the flashbacks and fan wank, the actual reason for the Rani's plan was kind of lost in the shuffle. We knew how she was doing all this, but the why was left vague until the very ending, all for the sole purpose of a name drop that meant absolutely nothing to half the audience. So naturally, it's up to the reality war to do everything itself, which is always a recipe for disaster. It starts with an incredibly annoyingly quick, clean and tidy resolution to the cliffhanger, which had basically seen people popping out of existence. But it's okay, because they're all fine now, I guess, continuing to show how frustrating it is for Doctor Who to raise the stakes so ludicrously high every single season. Oh, and the Doctor is fine because Anita from Joy to the World shows up with a magic door to pull him out, which immediately took me out and set the whole tone for the episode. I'll get into this again later, but it's basically like Dave Filoni with that stupid World Between Worlds. And the trademark Filoni stink only worsens throughout. So, buckle up. So, the first part of this episode hinges entirely on this one-off side character from a Christmas special showing up with her magical fan service doors that connect directly to BBC iPlayer. Yeah, apparently she just has a master key now. OMG, a master key? Turns out she's a Time Lord all along. No, luckily that doesn't happen, although I wouldn't put it past this episode at this point. Instead, she has a much worse fate, becoming a glorified doorstop for the rest of the episode. Like, yes, it is funny when she keeps reminding everyone she's just in hospitality, but she's literally only in the episode to hold open her door that somehow keeps the entirety of the real world in balance and allows everyone to be normal. And oh yeah, the Doctor is able to magically change back into his outfit, and UNHQ just conveniently turns back to normal, and everyone gets all their memories back, rendering the cliffhanger completely pointless, and also the entire episode before as well. And seriously, can they please stop setting these finales in that same goddamn unit control room every time? It's so boring and annoying. I'm so sick of it. UNIT is a huge mess in this era, and it's something I will be making a video about. don't you worry. Honestly, the way this episode resets everything and brings in these characters like Anita and Rose Noble just feels like Russell T Davies watched too many Disney Plus shows during the COVID lockdowns. It's just absurd. The whole main body of the episode is a complete mess. It's just the unit tower firing lasers at the giant dinosaur things, which are apparently like antibodies or something. But who cares about the actual internal logic and consistency of storytelling rules when you can just have a skyscraper literally rotate to start shooting guns? I'm fine. It doesn't get worse. I swear it does get worse. And I swear I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm absolutely fine. I'm not crashing out. Okay, I'm crashing out. But let's continue. So you know how the Rani is meant to be the villain of this story? You know, the character that's most notable for facing off against Mel in the classic series? Yeah, well, they talk for like 2 seconds in this episode during a long dialogue scene, basically explaining who this character is. Remember back in The Sound of Drums, we had that beautiful monologue about the Doctor growing up on Gallifrey and how the Master went mad. Yeah, I missed when the show was compelling like that too. But instead now we just get badly blocked scenes of people talking. Just so much talking without the dialogue actually being interesting. At least Mel's explanation of the Rani's apathetic experimentation is actually accurate to the character, so congratulations on this episode for doing the bare minimum for once. And hey, I even like the idea that the Rani is disgusted by the idea of a half-human, half-Time Lord hybrid, considering she definitely would be a supporter of eugenics based on what we do know. Although she herself isn't fully Time Lord anymore apparently, in a bit of a glossed over explanation of her surviving the Master's destruction of the Time Lords a couple of seasons ago. Yeah, she just tweaked her DNA or something to conveniently survive. Oh, and apparently Time Lords are sterile now rather than dead, despite that clearly not being what the series 12 finale was about. But I guess you can't just say the Rani escaped or was already off-world or fled during the Time War. No, now they have to be completely magically sterile to make the plot work. Even the Doctor, who wasn't in that previous destruction for the sterilization wave. God, what a mess. Yes, so the whole episode centers around Poppy. Seriously, after this episode, I'm as sick of the word poppy as an 1800s opium den. God knows how many times they say it in this episode, but I got real sick of the name and the character by the end.
Poppies. Poppy. 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 Poppies. Poppy. Poppies. Poppies. Poppy. Poppies. Poppy. 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 Poppies. Poppy. 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 Poppy.
I seriously cannot believe Davies hitched his entire second era to the presence of a character from Space Babies. At least she wasn't Susan in the end. Actually, Susan doesn't even show up at all, despite being heavily teased in both previous episodes and the previous finale in a big way. Hell, they even imply the Doctor has never actually been a father before, despite episodes within this very era suggesting he can be. There's just no consistency or rules, so why bother watching if nothing actually matters? Oh, and Poppy is also a way to just give up on Belinda as a character. They literally lock her in the cupboard and forget about her for the rest of the episode. Yeah, she undergoes a completely misogynistic character assassination here. Time itself is literally rewritten for her to have been a single mother this whole time, unironically supporting Conrad's conservative world by suggesting that's all Belinda is capable of being. And also, as pointed out by my good friend J-Boy, a big part of this episode hinges around Conrad getting a good ending for making a nice world where people can be happy. Yet the same character that says this spent the whole of the last part in the homeless camp full of disabled people Conrad didn't even think about. So it feels a little bit of a contradiction to claim he just wanted people to be happy and he was misunderstood or something. Now, like some people have suggested, it would be one thing if Ruby was just saying it to win him over, but the episode gives him such a happy ending, it doesn't feel like that was just part of the plan. Oh, and whilst Conrad and Ruby are having a gaslight off, the Doctor tries to stop the Rani and Mrs. Flood from creating a new Gallifrey, which itself just feels like a poor amalgamation of End of Time and Timeless Children combined. And you know when you're a bad episode when you're a poor imitation of the other worst finale of all time. Yes, the Rani's plan is to use Omega's body as the basis of this new Time Lord DNA, despite him previously having no actual body and being made of antimatter. But I guess Davis forgot about that. Not that it matters anyway, because we don't actually get Omega in this episode. Instead, we just get a giant skeleton creature. Damn, yeah, they really did it again. This is Sutekh 2, Electric Boogaloo. Genuinely, what's the point in making a whole song and dance of bringing back a legacy character or a classic Who monster if you're just going to completely change everything about them? Omega was introduced in 1973 and last appeared in 1983. I say that as if he was a staple of the show, but no, he only appeared twice, which is the same amount of times as James Corden, by the way. Anyway, Omega was established as a Time Lord who invented time travel and got trapped in an antimatter universe, becoming insane and believing he was betrayed by Rassilon and the other Time Lords because of his ambition. It's a good character concept, and this episode does at least try to initially stick to that backstory, but then it goes completely off the rails by doing the whole myth turned real thing again, and having him now actually be a godlike being. So he's this really goofy giant CGI skull monster that looks like something out of the world's worst Soulsborne game. And that's coming from someone who hates all Soulsborne games. It truly baffles me that this era insists on so many returning characters and monsters when it was meant to be a reset. Again, this is something I have an upcoming video about, which ironically needs reshoots because of the episode ending, but it's just crazy to me how this was supposed to be a fresh start, yet you need to do constant homework to understand who people are or why these monsters matter. The episode tries to talk up Omega as this huge deal, but then delivers this absolute slop. It's terrible and a completely different character just using the name for cheap recognition. When Davros came back in Journey's End, he wasn't perfect, he had some eyebrow-raising differences in character, but the episode did so much to build him up and explain him not only as a returning threat with name recognition, but also something we can immediately fear, because they reintroduced him as a Time War survivor. They didn't change the design, they didn't have him act completely different, it was just a genuine modern reinterpretation of the character. But Omega in this story, he's basically just something like the Beast or Abaddon instead. It's genuinely the worst of both worlds. Bringing back a character people need to do homework for, and then not even using him in the way he exists to be used. Imagine if The End of Time came out and instead of Rassilon being expertly played by Timothy Dalton in a memorable, fantastic performance, he was just a giant, rotting CGI pineapple. It removes all the nuance of character, interesting personality, and intrigue. Omega in this episode is just so pointless and useless. He shows up, eats the Rani, and then leaves. That's his entire contribution after 2 whole episodes of build-up. Bravo, Russell! Great job! Yeah, so despite the Rani initially being the big bad of this finale, all she really gets to do is a couple of monologues and then Omega scoops her up for a succulent meal.
Gentlemen, this is Democracy Manifest.
Honestly, I have no idea why they have him eat this version of the Rani and not Mrs. Flood instead. You know, the incarnation who was the past incarnation and therefore can't regenerate again, at least not by the rules provided by the Giggle. That episode claimed the 14th Doctor would still eventually become the 15th, but now I guess they're entirely separate incarnations. Otherwise, Mrs. Flood, who escapes here, is now a narrative dead end who can't regenerate, whilst her successor with infinite possible return faces is the one that gets eaten and is now completely out of the show. So now we're in a weird position where Mrs. Flood, therefore the Rani, can't regenerate, so the character as a whole is essentially permanently dead, barring magic master-like returns from the dead. And if Mrs. Flood does become a different Rani, then that means so will the 14th Doctor. Not a Rani, of course, a different incarnation of the Doctor. None of it actually makes any sense, and Russell doesn't even try because it's all just vibes. I honestly don't see why Omega had to be in this episode at all. The Rani, Mrs. Flood, Conrad, and the God Baby are already enough of a villain group posing a huge threat with their reality-bending shenanigans. So just keep it simple. We don't need a big CGI monster thrown into the mix. It honestly would just be so much better and more fitting if Mrs. Flood turned on the Rani. Not because she suddenly wants to be good, just because it's interesting to see the trend of Time Lords not being able to coexist with their other incarnations. Something made even more interesting when you throw in bi-generation and the idea that both versions now believe they have equal legitimacy. So just have them betray each other and the Doctor exploits that to fix everything. Omega is wholly unnecessary and a complete bastardization of a beloved villain for absolutely no reason. And here's the point in the video where I tell you to like and subscribe. I can't even be bothered to try and cleverly integrate it this time because, you know, why should I bother putting effort into my scripts when Russell T Davies clearly doesn't? Oh, and how does the Doctor save the day in the end? Well, remember the whole thing a while ago about Russell T Davies not liking how the sonic screwdriver resembled a gun? Yeah, well, the Doctor just grabs the Vindicator and uses it like a goddamn arc caster from Star Wars Battlefront, banishing Omega back to the Shadow Realm. It's ludicrously stupid and contradictory, further showing how pointless Omega was in this entire goddamn episode. And then Ruby teleports behind Conrad, you know, nothing personnel kid, to steal the God Baby and end the wish. So everything goes back to normal, and it turns out the Bone Palace was the TARDIS the whole time, for reasons. Don't know how that happened, don't ask questions, just consume the slop and thank your masters. Anyway, the wish baby becomes a normal baby with no more wishes, gets offloaded to worst mother of the year Carla Sunday, and then the episode becomes a 20-minute story about goddamn Poppy, because apparently Poppy is the key to all of this. I will admit, it's nice to see the Doctor, Belinda and Ruby together in the TARDIS. It really makes me wish they actually had a proper adventure together where they could actually spend time with each other in the heat of battle whilst also having these bookends, you know, kind of like something the Doctor's daughter tried to do back in the day to middling results, but we haven't had anything like that since, and this season feels like a wasted opportunity to try it again and show us the current companion and their direct predecessor on a proper adventure together. But instead we just have a little chat inside the TARDIS, then the Doctor and Belinda forget Poppy existed, and the episode just keeps going? You know the meme about Lord of the Rings Return of the King having like a billion endings, how it just keeps going? Well, imagine that, but it's actually bad and not cathartic or touching like Return of the King. That's the very drawn out ending of the Reality War. I kid you not, the episode's plot ends at like the 40-minute mark, and then there's just another 25 minutes dragging out the same idea of Poppy was real. How did Poppy exist? What happened to Poppy? Over and over again, it just keeps going. It's honestly ridiculous and completely loses what little plot the episode did have. You know what would have been interesting? Just have the Doctor gaslighting Ruby because Poppy got erased after all and Belinda forgot her, so he's trying to protect Belinda despite Ruby still retaining those memories for whatever enigmatic reasons are implied. That would have been a bit more nuanced and compelling and a bit about the Doctor's darker side of the character where he has to make these ethical dilemmas. Instead of just, reality isn't actually right yet, we need to change it back, and then having a whole confusing epilogue where Belinda is suddenly actually Poppy's mum, and her whole character and timeline has been rewritten in a very invasive moment that's played off as a happy ending, despite the Doctor doing something his literal past incarnation comes back to warn him to not do. And you know, that literally erases the actual companion we've been following the whole time and creates this fake Belinda in her place who now has a baby. They literally just wipe the Belinda we've actually followed out of reality, and that's seen as a good thing. What the hell were they doing? It's such a weird sequence of events, especially since Ruby just literally disappears from the episode. It's crazy how she's presented as the 15th Doctor's most important friend and companion, yet she never even gets acknowledged in the whole elongated, bolted on regeneration sequence. We just have her crashing out and nearing a nervous breakdown of self-doubt until the show leaves her behind completely unresolved. It's just insanity, but also highly relatable. Yes, so in something that was probably filmed like last week due to how weirdly it's added in, the episode culminates in the surprise regeneration of the 15th Doctor. Well, I say surprise, but it got completely leaked even despite multiple endings apparently existing to throw off leaks. Seriously, this show needs some goddamn flex tape. Despite it making no sense, I actually liked the 13th Doctor coming back during this ending. If you've followed this channel for any amount of time, you'll know I was never exactly the biggest fan of her era. I was very critical of it. But I always thought the 13th Doctor was simply written badly, and this is a nice, albeit short and still sometimes cringy, redemption of sorts for the character. And it is much better than David Tennant coming back again, at least. Although they kind of got the time crash logic the wrong way around this time. And also, does this technically make the Reality War a multi-Doctor story? I think it does. Anyway, the only way to fix reality and keep Poppy real is for the Doctor to use regeneration energy for some reason. So he shoots out some Sith lightning and the screen cracks and suddenly the Doctor is in Belinda's parents' garden because yes, like I mentioned, Poppy is her daughter now. It really is so weird how Belinda's character regresses to just being a single mother, despite the previous episode using that kind of reductive characterization as satire of conservative values. But yeah, no, apparently Poppy has been there in the background this whole time because of timeline shenanigans. So Poppy went from being real in Space Babies to then the memory of the Doctor turning into a wish child, to then being real, to then not being real, to then being real again because all of reality was restructured around her. I miss when this show was just about going to the planet Dingbat to fight against Nazi pepperbots. That's all it ever needed to be. The future of Doctor Who has been very uncertain for a while now. Rumours of cancellation have been rampant as per usual. And rumours about Ncuti Gatwa's own future with the show were very prominent going into this season. Well, it turns out he's done, because yeah, you can only sit around waiting for a third season for so long while you're getting offers elsewhere. It's like someone asking their partner for like a 6-month break to sort out some personal issues. You can't really park someone in that way, it's not fair. So I'm not surprised Gatwa left the show. In fact, I can't even blame him because it's become unsalvageable even without this atrocious ending. Honestly, I would have found it way more interesting if we have this regeneration energy saving the day, then cutting to the Doctor in an Inception-esque too good to be true reality within his successor's consciousness. We've never seen that kind of perspective on regeneration before. It's always been implied that each Doctor still remains in some sense, elements of their personality remaining inside even long after the change. Hell, Big Finish even has a whole Time Lord based around the idea that these elements of the personalities of previous incarnations never get locked away properly and stay fully present, constantly battling for control because they're all fully sentient incarnations trapped inside one body. Obviously, I don't want that kind of fate for the Doctor, but I've always been a firm believer every incarnation lives on spiritually in some sense, which Power of the Doctor even seemed to support with the Guardians of the Edge. So it could have been so interesting to see that idea explored through the lens of this ending. We could see that regeneration happening, but instead of switching to the new Doctor's perspective, we stay with the old for a moment just for that little bit of closure. It's not the kind of narrative beat I'd personally integrate myself, at least not in the way it would work within this episode, but the ending with Belinda and Poppy feels almost too perfect and artificial, so it would make sense to capitalise on that by having it a happy ever after for the Doctor as we then return to the 16th Doctor to continue the normal adventures. Well, not this 16th Doctor, at least. In the biggest surprise in the show's entire history, despite being leaked too, the Doctor regenerates into Billie Piper. Yeah, you know, that one actor that played a companion 20 years ago. Talk about the show cannibalizing itself. I guess Russell really is just obsessed with his own cast and crew from the good old days. As friend of the channel, Channel Pup so eloquently puts it, this episode is inbred. Literally everything in this episode is just a snake eating itself by bringing things back rather than moving the show forward, and Billie Piper as the goddamn Doctor is the absolute pinnacle of creative bankruptcy that has killed my love for the show. Look, Rose was my first companion. I grew up watching her alongside Chris Eccleston and David Tennant. She's not my favourite from that era, but she was my first, and I appreciate the character. And even then, I wouldn't bring her back in any format because there's no need to. Rose had her time, she had her story, and she had her ending. Even her coming back as the Moment was a bit questionable, but I can let that slide because it wasn't a huge deal. But to make her the Doctor is absolutely absurd, and it reeks of desperate stunt casting to pop a rating. And to use Russell T Davis's own words, generate content. This fraud, right? This absolute fraud cannot let go of his original tenure and characters who left the show before the majority of the audience now watching was even born. The whole point of Davis coming back was to save Doctor Who, because it was in a rocky place. He was considered a safe pair of hands, tried and true, who can steady the ship and build a foundation for the future. But instead, he has used this opportunity to hand out jobs to his mates. Billie Piper is a fantastic actor, but there's no need for her to come back as the Doctor. It's clearly stunt casting to make headlines, get people talking, and it's absolutely cynical and counterproductive. It's the kind of thing Dave Filoni does with Star Wars, since Filoni straight up created a whole time-traveling portal system as a way to keep his favourite OC alive. You know, the kind of thing I did with Captain X, the Jedi clone trooper, who got frozen into carbonite so now you could live 100 years in the future, because I was like 10 years old. These guys are way older than that. Now we have 3 David Tennants and 3 Billie Pipers running around the Doctor Who universe. It's absurd, it's reductive, and it's killed my passion and optimism for the show. Okay, let's have a little moment, you and I here. Okay. At the end of last year, I made a very heartfelt review of Twice Upon a Time. It was my last ever retrospective Doctor Who review and the end of the tier list, because it was the last time Doctor Who meant something deeper to me. I was very candid and open about my experiences with the episode's themes, and how important Twice Upon a Time and Doctor Who as a whole is to me. You know, I come here every week, I make these videos for you. Sometimes we laugh together, sometimes I piss you off by misunderstanding things or being harsh on episodes you like. But I do this all because I care about Doctor Who. It's all from a place of love. It's a show that has meant so much to me for my entire life. I started watching 20 years ago when I was just 5 years old. I was awestruck, terrified, and absolutely glued to the screen every single week, and I couldn't get enough of it. And then when I got older, the show was still a constant in my life during adolescence and the struggles that came with it. It was a reliable, benevolent companion throughout my life, even when I didn't deserve it. On my 18th birthday, I secretly watched Smile, pretending to my parents that I was done with the show because it had gone cringe and woke and politically correct. But I still couldn't bear to walk away, and now as an adult that grew and changed, I love Series 10, and I wish I had appreciated it more at the time and that I hadn't been so immature and easily swayed by online grifters just making things up. This show will always be so special to me, but it's committed itself to a direction I just can't follow. I hate what it's become. I hate that the very same man who created this world for children like me and had such a care for making Doctor Who accessible has come back to create self-indulgent fanfiction for himself with no care for quality and still no care for the well-being of his cast and crew. I fundamentally disagree with Russell T Davies' idea of Doctor Who. He has tried and succeeded at turning the show into something it isn't. And now it's eating itself alive with references and desperate casting for nostalgia's sake, without ever trying to just be a good show. There are still 60 fantastic years of Doctor Who in the past, and I'm never going to let go of those. I'll still make videos about the past. But until Russell T Davies leaves, I can't go forward with Doctor Who. I don't care if Billie Piper isn't actually the Doctor, because they're playing coy without a clear future plan. You know, they can easily backtrack from here. This isn't the show I fell in love with, and I think this is where I have to do something I've never actually been able to do in the many toxic relationships I've been in, and just leave. It's over. The Reality War is a terrible episode, and it's definitely a final nail in the coffin for my enjoyment of current Doctor Who. It feels like when I was standing in the middle of a crowd at Star Wars Celebration, watching a trailer for Ahsoka, feeling absolutely nothing but apathy, whilst everyone around me cheered and clapped for the things they recognised. It was the exact same with the Reality War. I sat in the cinema surrounded by people cheering and clapping at the return of Billie Piper purely because she's someone they recognise from the show's past. There's no creativity left. It's just a parade of cameos and familiarity to eke out what little faith and interest the existing audience has left in the show. Look, it's Project Indigo. I clapped because I know what that is. Look, there's a Zero Room. That's something I've seen before. Also, I hate how the episode uses the incredible emotional score from The Doctor Falls and Twice Upon a Time. It's not deserved here. This episode doesn't deserve or earn any cameos or callbacks. There are a billion characters all doing nothing. The companion gets shut in a cupboard with a baby. The other previous companion who left the show gets to have the storyline instead. It's a creatively bankrupt disgrace of a finale that I can only give a first ever U grade to. It's ungradable, by far the worst finale in modern Doctor Who history, and controversially, maybe even in all of Doctor Who, even with something like time flight in contention. I am tired. I am exhausted. I am done. I'm sick of making these negative videos. I don't want to make negative videos. That's the only emotion Doctor Who seems to make me feel anymore. I want to feel passion and joy again. I want to tell you all in detail how much I love Pokemon Emerald. I want to explore the greatest stories wrestling has to offer. I want to tell you why football is one of the best, most thrilling, unifying and heartbreaking TV shows out there. I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I don't know how much longer I can make videos about a show and a franchise that hasn't sparked true joy and passion in a long time. I know from the stats, nobody ever watches this late into my videos, but I want to be transparent with you all. I will still make Doctor Who videos until I croak, but I want you to stay with me as we look at other things. I don't want to be stuck as a Doctor Who YouTuber when I have so much more I think I can offer. And in that vein, I want to give a shout out to some other small non-Who channels like Droomish, who makes incredible Pokemon deep dives, Grid Drop, who makes really fun F1 gaming challenge videos, and my personal friend Machi Musashi, who is just starting out. I miss being a creator pouring that kind of passion into videos. And I feel that the anger I felt about this episode of Doctor Who is a sign I should just walk away from the show. I will, eventually. I'll still make videos about the past, but I just hope you'll stick around for me when that stops. Hey, I guess it shows how bad Reality War is that it gave me a whole existential crisis and has almost made me quit my job. So, what do you think of the Reality War? If you liked it, I'm sure you've already told me in the comments. And for the penultimate time, if you're still even playing at home, did you get a Harbingo this week? Please, Duncan, tell me it was at least worth it for the Harbingo. Anyway, with the future unclear, I just want to say I love and appreciate you all, especially since it was my channel's 8th birthday the other day. You've all been amazing ever since I've been doing this. And as always, I just want to thank you for watching. Bye bye. And I'd just like to give a special thank you to my Asbantium level patrons, Chris Douglas, Fallon Cortez, and Jamie Ashton, my Platinum level patron, Matthew Burns, and all my Gold level patrons, Ben Salmon, Daniel Shillito, James Alea Waterhouse, and Seb Falco. Thank you so much for your support.
Pops.
Pops. Pops.